Okay, today should be an encouraging broadcast or video. If you're watching it as a video, some are watching it as a live stream, and then it turns into a video. We're going to cover what's going on in Israel, which is really rather profound. The government is really divided, and the people are divided, and they're breaking up, and there's protests all over the place, and Netanyahu doesn't know what to do anymore. Every way he turns, he gets another faction of the government turning against him. And he seems to be defying the Supreme Court. That's his intention right now. And I'm going to explain to you what the former president of the Supreme Court told us would happen if that occurs. In other words, Netanyahu breaking the democracy, becoming, almost a dictator, not really a dictator, but usurping the power of his office over the democracy, which has three factions for checks and balances. You have the executive, which Netanyahu is. You have the Knesset, which he is managing to control. He has the largest political party in Israel, the Likud, and the Supreme Court. And he's trying to cut the Supreme Court out of the process. And this is really dividing the people of Israel, combined with all the wars and stuff. Lebanon launched 5 projectiles at us. I guess they were missiles. Very recently, this morning, I think 2 of them landed in Lebanon, and 3 of them were taken down. So we're getting shot at by Gaza, we're getting shot at by Yemen, and we're getting shot at by Lebanon. Netanyahu is not doing a good job. Okay, the hostages are not back. The country's divided. Some of the big players are calling for strikes. If Histadrut, the big union, calls for a strike, which they have not even mentioned, but it could happen, then much of the government, the country would shut down. Stores, all sorts of things, supermarkets, businesses. The high-tech sector is talking repeatedly, I believe, about calling for a strike to protest what Netanyahu is doing. This is really serious, okay? And the head of the Shin Bet, like our FBI, is releasing damaging information on Netanyahu, and Netanyahu wants to fire him, and the Supreme Court says no and put a temporary stay order in. And now we're waiting to see what Netanyahu is going to do. But the indications are Netanyahu is going to ignore the Supreme Court and saying they have no right to do this. And the head of Shin Bet is saying that his termination is not legal and he's ignoring it. And now there's 5 cases filed in the Supreme Court against what Netanyahu did with the Shin Bet. And now they have authority, and they've issued a temporary restraining order until I think March the 8th or 10th, April 8th or 10th, to say Netanyahu can't do this, and Netanyahu was saying I can, and there we have it. And the president of the Supreme Court, the former president of the Supreme Court, said that this has never happened in the history of Israel. And if it does occur, he says the remedy would be to use the army to stop Netanyahu. We're not facing a civil war where one colored person is fighting another or one religion is fighting another. Well, we are with the Muslim terrorists in the West Bank and stuff, but other than that, no, it's not the people trying to kill each other. It's a lot of people in Israel want to get Netanyahu, get rid of him. And Netanyahu it's possible that this Netanyahu gave him the the way to do that right now. Now, this has got a lot of moving parts, okay, and I'm going to get into it during the broadcast, but you better believe me, this is real, okay? And then I'm going to do the Bible prophecy stuff with you and show you what's happening in prophecy. But it looks to me, using many different indicators, which I'll try to cover with you today, that the two witnesses are going to appear, and Elijah is going to start working with the Levites, and everything we've been reading in prophecy. It looks like we're getting right down to it. Okay. I don't know how Elijah could be working with the Levites and the Netanyahu government operating at the same time. They're diametrically opposed. So that's what's going on. I'm using the phone again. I did pick up a good amount of offerings. Thank you for those that sent funds in for the new replacement of the iPad, which I don't know if it had respiratory failure, a stroke, a heart attack. I don't know what happened, but it's fairly dead. I'm reflecting back on it, and I had a lot of trouble typing on the screen. I'd hit a Y and I'd get 3 Ys. I hit an A and I'd get 2 A's, you know. So it has a lot of, I think it just wore out. I've used it many hours a day for at least 3 years, and I think it just died, you know, it just wore out, you know. So I'm looking around as to what to do, and there's a marked, you know, shortage of refurbished iPads in Israel. Not really seeing that, and trying to hold out if I could get enough offerings to get the iPad, what do they call it, the Pro, which I believe has better microphones for the broadcast. The one that I was using, I think, has 4 or 6 microphones, so the sound comes out pretty good, you know. And I'm trying to see if I could hold out and get enough funds from people to get one of the good ones, a newer version, you know, that has the right chip and all of that stuff. So, and then comes the question of memory, and they sell cheap ones with 64 gigabytes, which is probably when I, you know, transfer everything I have on there with all the apps and the data, and I don't know how well that'll do. I think I'll be running out of memory. So I'm trying to hold out a little bit. It's Shabbat anyway, and hope I get some more people to contribute some money for me to get the iPad that works really well. What else can I tell you? I'm thinking about getting a better phone. This phone is 5 years old, I think. Getting a better phone. This phone could even be more than 5 years old. It could be 6, I'm not sure. I'm thinking about getting a better phone that I could do the broadcast with. I don't know if that's feasible. I really don't know. If any of you have input, let me know. But it's a thought that I'm having, and I don't know which is the better move, you know. So I'm looking into that too. If there's a phone that exists that has really good, you know, microphones for live streaming, I'm going to research this. I started researching it already. I'm going to try to do more research, and that might be a happier medium. I don't know. You know, with the good iPad, I still have people periodically say they can't pick up the sound too good. So I don't know. the picture's not highly relevant because I don't show that much data, or, I don't do videos, other people's videos on here because of copyright strikes, and, so I don't do that much of that, I hardly ever do it actually. So that's where we're at on that. So right now, I'm trying to upgrade the offerings and get more so I can get a better device. Um, and we'll see how that develops. You know, but I do have enough to get an older, weaker iPad already that would be smaller and have less memory, and it wouldn't have all the features of the Pro. So I don't think the microphones would be that good. So maybe I'm better with a better phone. I don't know. I'm going back and forth, on that. But I'll have something fixed up pretty quick. You got to pretty much buy it in Israel because if you don't, well, like Amazon doesn't ship phones or computers or tablets to Israel, so you can't use Amazon. If I use the wrong, if I just go to some store, will my credit card work with some store? The credit card company may not let it go through. Then the other problem is that it's a 17% tax on coming in, but the tax would not own, if it's more than a $75 item, the 17% tax applies not only to the price of the item, but the shipping. And, you can't use the post office because Netanyahu privatized it, and basically it's a joke. It could take weeks and weeks, by the time it shows up with the post office, we could very, very likely be in redemption, believe me. So that brings you to FedEx, DHL, UPS, and a lot of times that stuff is $200-300 for the shipping. And then I got to pay the 17% not only on the item, I got to pay it on the shipping too, which makes the shipping even crazier. Believe me, when I tell you $200-300, I'm telling you that's what it comes, because it's not coming it's coming in a big box with all the junk they put in there with it, and it's probably going to be $200-300. So I'm probably going to just do it in Israel. I'm going to keep pursuing refurbished, but I looked and I wasn't really seeing much. So that's the update on that. And our weather we're coming out of that cold spike, which is not too great today. Um, we had one of the coldest nights I remember last night. I mean, it was cold, We're at 55 now, but there's no rain and the sun's out pretty good, so that's really not so bad. But we're only going to go to 62 today, but tomorrow we go to 67, and that's pretty normal for spring. And then the problem is the low is 45. But then Monday we're up at 73, and Tuesday we're at 80 degrees. So we're coming out of it, okay? And so it's just a cold spike. My wife told me that that's a way God uses to work with the barley or something. Well, if it's working with the barley, it's probably working with the other crops. I think she meant kind of delay it blooming or coming to fruition where it's ready. So that could be applying to other crops too. I don't know much about agriculture, so I better shut up. My wife knows literally about 10 times more about agriculture than I do. But, you know, I don't believe in calling the year based on agriculture. We're supposed to go according to Genesis 1 by the moon. You know, that's what we go by, not by what the crops are doing. Okay, let's continue and get going here. We're also going to cover the war with Gaza, the war with Yemen, the coming war with Iran, and what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine is very easy to cover. I heard something about 3,000 drones from Russia coming into Ukraine. I don't know if they're planning it or how, I don't know. But anyway, Russia is pounding Ukraine. Ukraine is hurting Russia. They're just destroying each other, and the European nations are building up war stuff. Tensions in the Middle East are starting to get high. Japan is really mad at Trump over tariff war. Trump is putting tariffs on Japanese cars. I especially think something to do with electric cars, which might be giving Elon Musk an advantage. But again, on the other side of the fence, I believe Elon Musk is making the items, the cars inside America, so he's on the right side of it. And Japan may liquidate the U.S. Treasury bonds as a protest. I don't know, but the tariff war with Japan and Trump is not pretty, and Japan is mad, real mad. But that doesn't mean Trump is wrong. Trump is probably right. They were probably taking advantage of America. Okay, so that's then, you know, the standard tensions, North and South Korea, China and Taiwan are very active right now. Okay. Iran is slinging threats at America, left, right, and center about what they'll do if America attacks Iran. So there are no ceasefires. Erdogan in Turkey is in dire straits. Protests, bad protests, are breaking out in many cities in Turkey. And he's arresting people, and he fired a bunch of people in a city, I think in Istanbul, that are opposed to him politically. It's really a mess. Erdogan is in dire straits over there in Turkey. Okay, what I should do now is go jump into the live stream, check the sound and picture because I'm using the phone, put my posts up, and then we'll get started. But I do like to be honest and open about what I'm going to cover in the live stream. And what I'm telling you about the two witnesses getting ready to emerge openly in Israel is not to be taken lightly. I think it's very serious. But I do like to be honest. Okay, we got plenty of sound and the pictures there, but the pictures not of really any great importance. Okay, I'm going to put up some posts very quickly offering information. By the way, if you're going to send funds for the me to replace the iPad, please just use PayPal. It's very difficult to get the money into Israel from GoFundMe or Patreon. So try hard, please, to just use PayPal, because I could just pop that right into the bank here and use it. The other stuff is not easily done. Okay, let me get my posts going. All I got to do now is get my email address up and I'm good. And that shouldn't take but a few seconds. I'm also going to draw a parallel of events happening to Trump that are very similar to what's happening to Netanyahu. It's eerie how similar they are. Okay, got that done. And now I'm going to do some praise because we are a Bible believing site. There is no God like Jehovah. 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 There is no Messiah like Yeshua. 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 All right. So I guess what I should start with is what everybody's very interested in is what's going on in Israel with a potential civil war. And I don't think it's that far-fetched of a potential civil war, but I need for you to understand it's not going to be the North versus the South or something like that. It's not the people fighting the people. It's the people fighting the government, the Netanyahu government. Okay? That's what it is. Okay? The Shin Bet guy, the head of Shin Bet is an FBI type organization in Israel, but it's heavily on the side of intelligence, like a CIA, like a domestic CIA. And it does have some criminal investigative powers, but that's not the predominant purpose of the Shin Bet. It gets involved in, guns and things like that, terrorism related, war related events. It doesn't get involved in, a car theft or a bank robbery or, stuff like that. It's focusing on terrorism and war and intelligence inside Israel. Then we have military intelligence, which does things in Israel with relating to terrorism and outside Israel predominantly. And then we have the Mossad, which is really operating outside of Israel. They don't really operate in Israel. And that's straight up intelligence, like a CIA. Okay. So the Shin Bet head told Netanyahu, do the right thing or I'm going to release very damaging information about you. And Netanyahu's response to that was not to do the right thing and release and do the information pertains not to October 7th, at least what he's been releasing so far. It pertains to Netanyahu dragging out or postponing, pick your words, the Gaza war for his own political purposes. Netanyahu, about 3 years ago, I think, or it could be even longer, has 3 criminal cases filed against him in the courts of Israel. Okay, I believe it's in the High Court, the Supreme Court, and they involve corruption. And he's been dragging the trial out on and on and on by hiding behind his duties as a prime minister with wars, with this Gaza war. He's been dragging it out, and they ask him to appear in court. He shows up, and then a messenger comes in and he tells the court, "I'm sorry, we have an emergency. We're at war. I have to leave." Um, and they can't say anything about that because it's national security. He's the boss of the country. So he keeps doing this for years now, and he's trying to duck his criminal cases. If he gets convicted on all three, he basically, one case is 3 years maximum, the other is 3 years, and the other one is 10 years. It's a total of 16 years. If he got convicted, I think it would likely be on 2 out of the 3 only, and he probably wouldn't get maximum penalty, but he could. But I think he'd be looking at 3 to 5 years in jail. Now, you're talking about an elderly guy that just had a pacemaker installed a few months ago. So the stress of all of this on him is taking its toll. And then recently he said he had to go back into the hospital for a prostate. Now, some of you will know what I'm talking about. That's absurd, but others of you won't. I don't believe it was his prostate. I think they probably had to do something with his pacemaker as a guess, but I think it's a pretty accurate guess, but still a guess. So he's got problems, and he's being watched closely by people that don't think he's good for Israel. Many people in Israel, I would say in the millions, I would say at least 2 million people in Israel think he's a living nightmare, and he is. He's an absolute disaster for the country. He rules us as if he hates us. He's just bad news on any level. Our life in Israel under the 20-something years of Netanyahu as prime minister has diminished. He's opposed to Aliyah. He doesn't want Jews coming here, and he deters them from coming. He makes it as hard as he possibly can for them to come here. And a lot of them come here and they leave because it's so bad. People from Ukraine, Jews, came here and they left. Russians left. He's horrible. That's opposing God. That's in Ezekiel 34. He's the bad shepherd, or one of them, in Ezekiel 34. He doesn't want to, get the lost back in Israel. He wants to keep the world Judaism from coming to Israel. Okay? And he's perverted a lot of the people in Israel to think that way. Okay? A lot of people in Israel get jobs in big companies and the government based on political connections, which is called protexia. It's Israel slang. It means favoritism because you're plugged in with the political people. So they don't bother getting an education. They just use the protexia with their political connections, and they get high-level jobs in their complete incompetence. And then they hire the people with the education and the experience to work under them. This is how Satan bots operate in every country. Okay? Yes, he's an S-bot. And they are a problem, I ran into a person once that was number 2 in one of the largest entities in Israel, in the government, in the government. And this person, I don't think, went to college for even a week. I think this was a high school graduate, definitely not a highly qualified person. So this is a horrible thing that goes on, okay? Netanyahu runs those gay rights parades through Jerusalem, gay pride parades, I think they call it. That infuriates the religious people in Israel because it violates the Torah. And he keeps doing it. And then he puts a yarmulke on and acts like he's an observant Jew. And, he's a nightmare. Okay. We have a $3 a gallon tax on gasoline. It costs us $9 a gallon to buy diesel fuel, roughly. Why should it be $9 a gallon? You have any good ideas? I don't. The tax on a new car is 100 to 150%. You listening? 100 to 150% for a new car. Why? The income tax, if you work for a company and let's say you make, I don't know, $4,000 a month or more than that, something like that, you're paying 50% income tax, 50%, 50. That's about what you're going to be paying. Okay? On top of your price for fuel, on top of your price for the car. And anything you buy in Israel has a 17% tax on it. Even if you buy services like an accountant or a lawyer, 17% tax. You understand? Real estate. Many people rent here in Israel because the houses were cheap 20, 30 years ago. So a lot of people invested and bought houses, right? And they rent them out. And the houses are so expensive, it's beyond belief how expensive they are. If you want to get a apartment, like let's say a typical apartment complex in America, right? A 2-bedroom, maybe 850, 950 square feet. You're going to pay, I don't know, $800-900 a month in America, something like that. Okay, you're probably going to pay double for that here, but they don't have any apartment complexes like that in Israel. I never saw a single one where they got a pool and a gym and grounds and parking. Never saw one in Israel like that. They put up apartment houses where they could be 6 stories to 20, 30 stories high, right? And the same size apartment over there, people got to buy, or you got to rent it from somebody who bought it. But, what are you going to pay to buy an apartment like that in a rural area where there's no work, no big companies and stuff like that? Probably $175,000. And that's the same. It's worse than the apartment you rent for $800-900 in America in a rural area, because it's not a townhouse where there's 2 floors and it's nice and scenic, and this is a shoebox. You got a hole in the wall to live in. If you want a nice apartment in a not so rural area and you want maybe 1,000 or so square feet, $350,000-400,000. You want to get a nice apartment in a big city that size, $600,000-800,000. You want a nice 2,500, 3,000 square foot apartment with a view in a big city, $1.5 million, 2.5, 3, 4 million, something like over in the millions of dollars, not shekels. Your electric bills are done through a national company that's part government. I think you pay about what people in America pay if they've got a good electric bill situation. It's not that bad in reality, okay? If I want to put solar power up on my whole house here, what I think, now they may have changed the law, But what it was for years is I could take that solar power and only sell it to the electric company at a reduced price, and I'd have to buy from them at a higher price the electricity. But they do let us have a solar panel for our water heaters. So what kind of ecology is that? We don't know what he puts in our water, fluoride or not. There was laws passed, they're not supposed to do it. People think maybe they don't, maybe they do, I don't know. I stay with bottled water. I tell you, the healthcare system here is very affordable, really, but it's substandard. What do I mean? Well, I don't use it, I haven't gone to them in many years. But if you go there and you want to get, a prescription, you got a sore throat, cold or something, you want to get a prescription for that, they'll give you the antibiotics that they were using in America in the year 2008 or something like that, right? The same with heart medicine or other medicines. Nestle's is a big Israeli company. I'm telling you, they sell most of the ice cream in Israel. You put that ice cream and you leave it out, it doesn't melt. It kind of becomes a gel. How can it be ice cream? I don't eat ice cream, but if I did eat ice cream in the past, I would eat it occasionally. Like my wife would buy me a container like this. We'd get Haagen-Dazs or Ben & Jerry, which is real ice cream, and that would last me a month. I'd eat a spoon here and there. I don't really, it's garbage, but it's a sugar fix, So we haven't had ice cream in the house in maybe a year. I don't know, more maybe. I don't use it. But you got to buy Haagen-Dazs or Ben & Jerry. We got to buy kosher food. The rabbis banged the price of the kosher food up about by a third. So our food's expensive. So, but you can find non-kosher food. And, I'm talking about eating the same, animals, but you don't have to pay the rabbis. What the rabbis do is they wash the meat, then they put a lot of salt on it, and they don't use Himalayan sea salt. Get real. They use the junky salt, the stuff you throw down when there's sleet and ice on your sidewalk and your driveway. You put the salt in that. That's the kind of thing they use. I believe it's not the good salt. So is there a lot of high blood pressure in Israel? Yeah. Do a lot of people get prescriptions for Lasix, for water retention? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Why don't the rabbis use the Himalayan sea salt? Good question, isn't it? All right. So they wash it and then they salt it for hours, lots of salt. Then they wash it again and they salt it again. So you're getting a high sodium content, which is not good for you. And it tastes like crap. It ruins the taste of the meat. And it also makes it tough. And it's expensive. So if you go and you want to buy your ribeye or your filet mignon or one of your basic beef cuts, you can get it from the Arab supermarkets that don't kosher the food for a lot cheaper, and it tastes much better. And there's not a single place in the Bible where it tells you, in the Old or the New Testament, where it tells you you got to wash your meat, salt it, wash it, and salt it before you eat it. It tells you you can't eat the blood. You got to pour the blood out on the floor. I would think today, if you poured the blood off the meat into the drain, I don't personally see a difference between that and pouring it on the floor. Okay. I believe in the old days, a lot of the kitchens were outside the house. So they just would drip the blood out on the dirt and that's it, All right. So that's not in the Bible. That's in the Talmud. You see, they call the Talmud the Torah. They call the Kabbalah the Torah. The rabbis do. The rabbis have tremendous power in Israel. you're not, if you have to go to an Orthodox rabbi from the chief rabbinate's office of the government, and they have to declare your restaurant, your food processing plant, your supermarket or food seller or a little 7-Eleven kind of joint, you got to get the kosher certificate for them, or a major part of Israelis will not buy the food from you. And they're the only ones that could issue the certificate. You can't go to any other kind of a rabbi to get the certificate. So they got the competition knocked out. This is bad. Okay? This is bad. We have Israelis here that are second generation. Their mom and dad came over here when they were young, and then they had children, and they were born and raised in Israel, and they go to get married, right? They go to get married. And the rabbis want proof for them being Jewish. Just because they were born in Israel and raised Jewish and all that, that doesn't mean anything to them. So then a lot of times they'll come up and they'll say, well, the mother, we can't correctly establish her Judaism. So if you want to get married in Israel, you can only get married through the Orthodox rabbis. Okay? And they won't marry this woman. This happens a lot. So they tell the woman, you got to go through conversion, which is 2 or 3 years. You got to pay a lot of money for lessons and stuff like that, right? This is absurd. The woman is going to synagogue, for years, right? Okay. You see, the ultra-Orthodox look down on the regular Jews. They detest Messianics, and they look down with disdain upon secular Jews, which is half of Israel. Now comes Netanyahu and the ultra-Orthodox. They vote. They got political parties. There's 2 of them, Shas and United Torah Judaism, combined 15 votes out of 120 in the Knesset, which is our parliament or Congress. It's a one-house Congress. And you need 61 votes to be prime minister. So they control 15 votes. So they tell Netanyahu, hey, you want our support? We need more funding. So Netanyahu takes money from the Israeli public, the tax coffers, and gives it to them for support. And what do? They study Torah. Oh, do they study Torah or do they study Talmud? Well, they study Talmud. Mostly. They do study the Bible, the Old Testament. They believe if you put a New Testament in your house, you'll bring a curse on your house. And they look at the secular Jews as historical Jews and, things like this. They're terrible. Now, the lineage in the Bible does not go through the mother. It goes through the father. They've got that all screwed up. Then they turn around and have transportation open on Shabbat. Some cities open transportation, stores open. Then Yahoo blows with the wind. Whatever he needs to do to enhance his political position and stay in power, he gives in. But you see, now comes the draft. They finally, with Netanyahu kicking against it about 1.5 years ago or a year ago, passed the law that the ultra-Orthodox have to go in the draft. So the ultra-Orthodox basically tell Netanyahu, if we have to go in the draft, we're going to leave your coalition and go form another coalition or work with another political party that'll give us what we want. And that, under normal circumstances, would be bad for Netanyahu, but since he's facing 3 criminal cases totaling a max of 16 years in jail, like I said, he'd probably get 1/3 of that, or less even. But he, he's too old and too ill to go to jail, in my opinion, and he knows it. He's in his 70s. So the attorney general told Netanyahu that the government should put sanctions on the ultra orthodox that have not reported for the draft, because they sent draft notices to him and they're ignoring them. And Netanyahu will not enforce the decisions of the court, the high court, the Supreme Court, to draft them. It's wrong. There's no right they have to not go in the draft. None. Why should Israel support these people? They consider themselves elevated over the regular Israelis, other than the ultra-Orthodox. And they say, well, we should pray for Israel. We shouldn't be in the army. You understand yet? So what their message to the Israeli public is, as the Israeli public understands it, especially the 50% of Israel that's secular, is that our children are more valuable than your children. You send your children to go in the army and get wounded and killed, and we'll pray. There's no biblical excuse for this. There's no precept in the Bible for this. It's straight up corruption. That's it. So the Israeli public is infuriated at Netanyahu over that. So what was Netanyahu's response after the AG said put sanctions on the ultra-Orthodox that don't report for military service? Technically in Israel, is what it is they have to show up and enlist. Technical difference, but where in America you get a notice that tells you got to report. Well, they don't have a draft anymore, but I remember when they did. You got a notice that said, first you got a notice you had to go to an induction center and get a physical. And then if you passed the physical, you would be classified 1A, which means you're qualified to be drafted. And then one day you get a letter in the mail, you got a report for induction, and they give you, I don't know how many, 2 weeks, a month notice, I think a month. And you had to show up, and they gave you car fare money and stuff like that. So you would report to an induction station, and that was it. You took an oath, and now you're in the army now. You're not behind the plow. You're digging your ditch, So this is what they do in Israel. It's similar. It's about the same. The net effect is the same. So they don't go. And Netanyahu is helping them defy the Supreme Court. Netanyahu, in response to this, is saying the only way I'm going to stay in power is to strip the courts of their power. Because if they keep pushing the ultra-Orthodox like this, I'm going to lose my coalition. I won't be prime minister. The Supreme Court's going to demand I appear in court, or they'll send the police to get me, and I'll have to be in court, and they'll whisk my trial through, and I'll be in jail. This is the bottom line here. So he's dragging the war out. There's been accusations against Netanyahu from many soldiers over the Gaza war that he's dragging it out because they're boots on the ground in Gaza. They know. So he kept dragging it out and trying to initiate what he calls judicial reform. The first phase of it is what he's doing now, is where the politicians in the Knesset are going to appoint the judges and get rid of the existing judges and put their puppet judges in power. Okay? Netanyahu's trying to do that. He's got to get rid of the attorney general. And he's trying to get rid of the attorney general, but I think he wants to get rid of the Shin Bet guy first. the Shin Bet guy was releasing information publicly about how Netanyahu's dragging out the war in Gaza for his political protection so he could stay as prime minister and keep stalling his court cases. What you're going to see as I progress is that the government of Israel right now under Netanyahu doesn't know what it's doing. It doesn't know its right hand from its left. Let me take a quick look and check into the live stream. He doesn't know if he's coming or going. And that is not a good thing, because he's just jumping around trying to keep himself in office, and he doesn't really care what's right for Israel. I'm reading the chat. Thank you for all the greetings I'm getting. I had to turn up my light on the screen here. It's too dark. All right. Now, let's go back to, so if Netanyahu abides by the Supreme Court order to put the ultra-Orthodox in the draft, then the ultra-Orthodox are going to break his coalition up, and he's not just going to lose his place as prime minister, he's going to probably go to jail, and he knows it. Okay? Now, so the Attorney General was saying, well, I don't think Netanyahu could fire legally the Shin Bet head. He didn't do anything wrong. Releasing information about Netanyahu is not wrong unless he was lying about it, which apparently he wasn't. So this is another problem, and now he wants to get rid of the Attorney General. See, Israel runs itself as a democracy. Oh, yeah, kind of a democracy. There's a legislative branch, an executive branch, and a judicial branch, the High Court. Okay? And Netanyahu controls the legislative branch through his coalition, and he has the largest political party in Israel, the Likud party. And he is the executive branch, and then there is the checks and balances also coming from the judicial, the Supreme Court. However, he's trying to strip the Supreme Court of its power. So then he can do what he wants. And he doesn't tolerate any opposition, like the Shin Bet guy. Now, there was supposed to be an independent investigation about October 7th. It never happened yet in Israel. He had the military do it, which is a joke. So he's also fighting that off. And there's millions of people that are disgusted with Netanyahu, by the way, guys. He has the economy so suppressed. It's so hard to live here. They have laws under this moron Netanyahu where the landlords force the people to pay the taxes on their property. I got to pay property tax. Everybody does. They call it Arnona. Now, how sick that is. Landlords write leases where the tenant has to do the repairs to the house. And then they come up with a law and says, well, if the landlord won't fix it, you can deduct it from your rent. You got to be very, very careful. You really need a lawyer to help you do this and get it fixed and take it out of the rent money. But they let the landlord tell the people, if you want to move into my house, you have to give me 12 checks, post-dated checks for the first of every month, right? You got it? And the landlord gives those to the bank, and the first of every month, the bank hammers the check and he gets his money. You see how they do it? If you bounce checks in Israel, they'll close your bank account, and the other banks won't let you have an account. I don't know how many they let you get away with, 2, maybe 3. Okay. So if you want to put a stop payment on those checks you wrote to the landlord, you can do it. You have to go down to the bank, and the bank tells you you have to have, if the check was for, $500, well, let's be real, let's say the checks are $2,000 a month. You have to keep a constant balance in your account in excess of that $2,000 in order for the stop payment order to work. So if you don't have the money, you can't do a stop payment order in Israel. Does that sound like a fair government to you? Or does this sound like it's corrupt in favor of the wealthy Satan bots against the poor people? Obvious, right? So how do you force the landlord to fix your roof that's leaking, or your hot water heater that's not working? How do you get him to fix it? You can't. Try suing the landlord. You probably got an 80%, 90% chance of losing, unless the landlord did something really stupid. Because the courts favor the landlord. Corruption. Favoring the rich over the poor. It's all in the scriptures. Okay? The thing in Gaza in the south, Netanyahu's been pro-gun control this whole 20-something years, that piece of garbage. And the people used to pretty much be able to, before Netanyahu, I was living here, and I remember, if you wanted a gun, I never really bothered. I was, it doesn't work right in English, but it would be like a police reservist. And I had a police ID, and I used to go, I'd go in on, I didn't get paid, I was a volunteer, because I never went in the army, and I'd go on patrol and stuff like that. And they'd arm me. I'd get a gun from the police. Normally got an M1 carbine, which I really enjoyed. It was a nice gun. It was, what is the weight of that bullet? 110 grains, about 2,500 feet per second. So it would go through small cars. It was pretty deadly round, It's like a 9mm on super steroids. I mean, it would smack hard. And I had a 10-round clip, and I had a canvas thing on the butt that had 2 other 10-round clips. So I had 30 rounds, And but I never bothered getting a gun permit. All I would have had to do was go see the sergeant, ask him to write a letter, and he'd boom, 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 and I'd go down and get it. I didn't bother with it. I didn't want it. There was no real reason to have a gun. Terrorism was extremely low back then, and there was no criminality to speak of. I mean, we wouldn't lock the car, and we wouldn't sometimes go to sleep in the door to the apartment would be left open, and it was what for what, Little kids would go out in the street and play by themselves. It was a different country before Netanyahu. But I had friends that got guns, and if your job brought you anywhere in the occupied territories, as the media calls it, and you just would get a letter from your employer, you'd go to the gun store, you'd have to get fingerprinted, and you had to take training, which was an hour and a half, 2 hours. The gun store would have a range. Okay, this is the clip, these are the rounds, this is the slide, this is this, that kind of thing. And the paperwork would go through, and you'd have your gun. Okay. And you were able to, when they didn't have a CCW, it's permission to buy the gun. If you got permission to buy the gun, you could carry the gun concealed, or you could carry the gun openly. It didn't matter. So people that would live near Gaza had guns, mostly pistols. The popular pistol in Israel is a 9mm. They don't usually buy the extreme ammunition, like a high-speed hollow point. They buy basic military hardball 9mm, 115 grain bullets, full metal jacket. They're not a very effective weapon, but if you do 2 or 3 hits, you usually accomplish what you want. And this thing on October 7th never would have happened before Netanyahu, because the people had guns. So they would have started shooting out of the window in the doorway of the house at the people as they approached. And guess what? They wouldn't have approached. Guess what? They never would have came in. They never would have came in. And then the kibbutzim and the moshavs had an arsenal, because they ran their own security. They had an arsenal, and it was government rifles mostly. Yes, there were M1s. There was this old M16 thing. Gee, I forgot what they call it now. I haven't seen one in years. They weren't so great, but they weren't so bad. It was the same M16 223 round. And they had old Uzis, the big clunking Uzis, not the little ones. They were full auto. They had a 40-round clip. And what you would get is you'd get a clip, often had tracers in it for some reason. And they had metal band on the clip, so you had an extra clip attached to it pointing the other way, pointing down. So you hit your clip ejector, and then you flip it, and you shoved it back in, racked around it, and you were off for another 40 rounds. And the Uzi is not a great gun. The Uzi is good for, like, if you're going to
Something went wrong. Please try again.
Oh, this is doing something. I don't know what. If you're going to kick a door in like a drug raid, a DEA raid, and there's a bunch of guys in there, you go, brrr, and you could spray the room and knock them all out. That's it. You might be able to get out, even 100 feet with that thing, but not much else, not accurate, stuff like that, So if you had to drive around in the territories, you go to the arsenal, you live in one of those developments and check out a gun, and you drive around with it, But I could have had a gun license. I never wanted it, but he stripping the people of the guns, which is like writing speeding tickets at the Daytona 500. It's stupid, but he's stupid. Why? Because he's afraid that people would rise up against his regime, I believe. That's what I think he was afraid of. But there are guns in Israel, but there's not that many. They would pass laws that they're going to make the gun permissions easier, which happened a few times under this bum Netanyahu, and then he muddles up the bureaucracy and they slow it down and stop it. And now they want you to get a psychiatric evaluation from a psychologist as well. They want you to get a letter from the doctor that you're okay, you could shoot a gun, and they want to get a letter from a psychologist that you're okay. And then you got to take a 1-day course at a range, which they're going to only do in Hebrew. So they're going to discriminate against the people that don't have good Hebrew. You know, Netanyahu made the driver's licenses here so hard that people were leaving the country. They were driving like from England or France or America. They were driving cars for 20, 30, 40 years. They come here. You know, it used to be you just showed them your international license, took an eye test, and you got a license. So he was starting up with them where they had to pass a written test. So I went to take this written test. I have a master's in business and a bachelor's degree. And I failed the written test after studying extensively for it. Twice. I passed it on the third time. Now, I'm a reasonably good student, and I was failing the thing. Then the driving test is impossible to pass just about. So the people in the UK, they started screaming and said, we're moving back to the UK. We're not going to stay here if we can't drive a car. So then he opened it up and said, okay, if you had a license for 3 years in the UK, or, you know, you could get your license, something like that. You know, he's such, any way he can make it harder for Jews to come to Israel, he does. Is that a Satanist or is that a Satanist? You tell me. This is a person after Satan's own heart, okay? You know, think about it, you know, housing prices, rental prices, driver's license problems, right? For motorcycles, you know, they got like 3 different categories of licenses for motorcycles. One is 200 cc's or less, and then they got one that goes 500 or 600 cc's, another one that goes, I think, higher than that. And insurance for big motorcycles is almost, it's very, very expensive. Okay. So there's people in Israel that are against him firing the attorney general. There's people in Israel that are against him firing the Shin Bet head for telling the people the truth about what he's doing, which hurts him politically. There are people in Israel that are against him trying to do judicial reform. Now, Netanyahu's end game on judicial reform is to have a law passed called the French law. That's slang. France has a law that the prime minister or the president, whoever Macron was, you know, the head of the French government, is got immunity for anything done while he's a seated prime minister. Netanyahu wants, other countries have this too. Netanyahu, America could be one of them, by the way. America wants this law. Netanyahu wants this law in Israel for him, but he wants it retroactive, of course. So that crushes his criminal cases. But he can't pass such a law in the Knesset with the Attorney General and the Supreme Court as they are today, because they will say, you cannot pass such a law. What if you murder people or do child rape or plant explosives? You would be immune. No, you can't pass such a law. It's not a democracy if you do. You're a king, you're a Caesar. So what Netanyahu has to do first is weaken the attorney general by firing him and putting a puppet in, and stopping the power of the court by making a law that says that if the Supreme Court nullifies a law that the Knesset passed, all the Knesset has to do is re-vote on it a second time, okay? And if it passes a second time, the Supreme Court is nullified. So Netanyahu, to get that law passed, has to weaken the court because they wouldn't allow that law. He tried it. So that's what he's trying to do now, and drag the wars out and keep himself saying to the court, well, if it's peacetime, the court would say, well, you got to report, next month on the 10th, and we're conducting your criminal case. If there's no wars, or, what's he going to say? So now people are mad he drug out the war. He probably started the Lebanon war too, and dragged that out, I guess. And he's still apparently dragging out the war. He can't get the hostages back. He doesn't know what to do. So he tried negotiating with Hamas. Well, give us 10 hostages, we'll give you an extended ceasefire. See, Shin Bet doesn't want that because it's wrong. They could refortify, regroup. Okay? So then he said, well, you got to give us all the hostages, then you can get a temporary ceasefire. So what Hamas wants is they want Israel to completely withdraw from Gaza, leave the Rafah crossing with Egypt open so they could smuggle more arms in. They stay there, the Gaza citizens stay there, they rebuild Gaza, they refortify themselves, and anywhere from 1 week or 2 weeks to 2 months, they'll start launching rockets at Israel again. This, anybody who lives here will tell you, is likely the case, high probability. Okay? That's what Iran pays them for. Not only that, they want a port so they could receive weapons from Iran and other countries on ships. And they want an airport so Iran could fly weapons in. Now, the right-wing part of Israel, which also has about 15 votes, is saying to Netanyahu that if you do that, we're going to blow your coalition, and then you're going to have to stand for new election, and good night, because they know about his criminal cases, right? And other parts of the government will blow up against him too if he does that. So he's scared. He doesn't know what to do. He's not that smart. He's vicious. He's an despot, and he knows how to manipulate the political scene. Okay? So he's got a problem with the drafting of the Orthodox. If he helps the Orthodox, another contingent in Israel is mad at him and want to get rid of him and protesting. He can't get the hostages back. So the people that are friends and families of the hostages and want the hostages are protesting, telling him, do anything, basically, get the hostages back, and then we could always start a war with Gaza anyway. It doesn't matter. He doesn't want to do that. Of course, he'll lose his coalition, the right wing, and probably others will leave. Then he's got to stand for election. If he loses, which he probably will, he's off to the prison. Then he's got disputes over getting rid of the Shin Bet guys, same thing. Netanyahu's passing another budget, and he's giving more money to the ultra-Orthodox to support them while they study the Kabbalah and the Talmud. How do you think God feels? God says that the government here is holding our nose to the grindstone, and they are. People leave Israel. Young people go in the military, leave because they can't afford a house and they know how awful it is to be a renter. You have so few rental rights as a renter. Your rights are so diminished in this country. It's pathetic. The judges in Israel don't follow the law. Okay? They just don't. Do I think they're corrupt? Listen, when the head of the government for 23 years is corrupt, what do you think? Use your head. What do you think? There's reservists that don't want to show up for duty anymore because they know what Netanyahu's doing. Did Netanyahu have trouble from Biden? Yeah. He did. Had real trouble from Biden. The Houthis are shooting drones and missiles at us every day. Gaza's trying to get missiles every day. And Lebanon now kicked in. This morning, I think. 5 missiles, 2 landed in Lebanon, 3 were taken down. And the Israeli military said to the people, well, we guaranteed you safety up by the border and you're going to have it. And this is not tolerable, and we're going to hold the government of Lebanon responsible for this. Okay? And that was this morning. So that's going to start up with more bombings in Lebanon. And that helps him stay out of jail. And it also makes the people afraid to do anything about him. But the Hezbollah in Lebanon probably did this on their own without Netanyahu. You know, now he's got us embedded in Syria. No fighting yet. So what did the past president of the Supreme Court say the remedy for this is? And he said to deploy the army to basically remove Netanyahu out of office. What will the police do? Nobody knows. This never happened in Israel before since 1948. We don't know what the police would do. I know they can't stand up against the army. Would they even try? I think push comes to shove, they would stand down. What would Shin Bet do? He would support anybody that's the Shin Bet with this leader there would support anybody that's against Netanyahu. Shin Bet is powerful. They got a lot of weapons. I don't think they tell us how many they have, but it's in the thousands. The police are probably not going to do a whole lot of anything about this, okay? Now, the heads of the military are appointed by Netanyahu, so they may not agree with the Supreme Court either, and other people will. So what you would have in the beginning of this, if it blows up, is protests that are getting pretty ugly, but not that bad yet. They're not doing Molotovs or burning or hitting the police or anything, but they're getting animated. They were trying to, the other day, break through to Netanyahu's house in Jerusalem and get near his house and protest. But the way they got the barriers, you probably going to be about 2 blocks away from his house. The streets got checkpoints with police. You're not going to get near the house. Okay. The police may stop interfering with these people. See, Netanyahu's got to make a decision, and he's in what the psychologists call an avoidance conflict. Whatever he does, it's bad. If he makes this one party happy, the other party's unhappy. He can't get out of this. Netanyahu is got it on all sides. There's no escape for him. The only thing he's doing is now hoping for elevating the wars. So he's probably going to attack Iran with or without America and keep Israel in turmoil while he tries to find a solution, which he's been unable to do. Okay? He could probably calm the people down in Israel to a good extent if he got all the hostages that are alive out, which I think is 24. But that ain't happening. So now the latest thing is that Katz, one of the ministers, is telling Gaza, give us all the hostages now. I think Netanyahu is telling this too. Give us all the hostages now, or we're going to start annexing pieces of Gaza permanently. Now, let me show you why the government's in turmoil and they don't know what they're doing anymore. A few days before, their party line is, Hamas has to demilitarize and leave Gaza permanently. So what do they care about Netanyahu taking land when they're going to be thrown out of Gaza or dead? So they're not killing or torturing the hostages online on the internet because they don't want to wear out their leverage against Israel. So they'll keep the hostages in apartments with other people or likely in the tunnels, which they did before. So if we start blowing up the hostages, they're going to say you're blowing up the tunnels. They'll publicly tell everybody we're killing our own hostages. That will go badly for Netanyahu. Netanyahu has no good way out of any of this. So they're making stupid demands on Hamas. And the Arab pro-terrorist media knows that the government here is ready to crack up. So it could get to the point where the people fight against the executive branch of the government. Storm their offices and their houses and that, Before we get to that, we're probably going to have strikes. If the big union Histadrut calls for a strike, I think they got 1.3 million employees. They'll shut down the supermarkets, buses, trucks, everything. Israel will go into a form of collapse to put pressure on Netanyahu and the high-tech community, but I haven't heard anything from Histadrut yet that they might be in Netanyahu's camp. See, Netanyahu allows monopolies in Israel. The electric company is private and it's a monopoly. Oh, it is. It's a monopoly. Thinking. So they're threatening strikes, the high-tech industry, and others will probably join in. and they're going to try doing a strike and see if Netanyahu backs off. I don't know what will happen. Netanyahu could say the strikes are illegal because you're trying to manipulate the government for your own best interests and stuff like that. I don't know what will happen. If the strikes don't work, and Netanyahu is still playing these games, the government's going to be divided. He's going to say the Shin Bet head is not the head of Shin Bet, and the Shin Bet guy is going to say, I am the head, and the Attorney General and the Supreme Court will say he is the head. Then Netanyahu is going to try to put him under arrest. And the Shin Bet guy is going to have, 25 or 30 or 40 people from Shin Bet that are like FBI agents armed, and they're going to tell the police to stand down. Or he might have 150, whatever. So the people may rise up in arms against the government. People in the military may go against the government. What I don't think you'll see in Israel is the police or the military or the Shin Bet shooting civilians just to be shooting them. They won't do that. It's not going to be people versus people. It won't be that. It's people against the government for various issues. I don't know what the right wing guys, Smotrich and Ben Gvir, will do. I don't know. Erdogan in Turkey is failing. Egypt said that we never made a statement that we were going to release, that we would provide a temporary city in the Sinai Peninsula for 1.5 million Gazan civilians. Yet major mainstream medias around the world disclosed that they did say that. Then they did a public denial. It's very likely that they did say it. Egypt did say it, and then it got out in the media and it got public, and then they, to save face, they publicly denied it. That's what I think happened. Somaliland is definitely interested in taking in so many of the Gaza civilians. I don't know how many yet. The police in Sudan stormed the presidential palace. They entered it. So there's a coup in Sudan. There's a coup brewing in Turkey. There's a coup brewing in Israel. Netanyahu has a coup brewing because the judges are overturning a lot of things that Trump is trying to do. The American court judges are overturning them. So he has the same problem as Netanyahu with the courts. It's a mess, kids. And this is what I've been telling you in Malachi 3 and 4 and Zechariah 12. We don't see any signs of the Israeli government or the IDF when these events take place. They're not written down in the scriptures. They're not there. The government's So is it possible that the government does fall apart in various ways and the people just reject the government, and then the Arabs are going to move in on us because they see weakness in Israel, although the army will continue to protect us, but maybe not. And they do the siege, they surround us, and that's basically put a blockade on us. And that's when Elijah and Apostle John burned them both up. Is that possible? Yes. Is it likely? Yes. Am I saying it's 100% it's going to go down this way? No. Does it look like it is to me now? Yeah. Does it look really strong? Yeah. Yeah. Is it possible that the Israeli government may recover from this? Yes. But I'm not expecting it. They have to get rid of Netanyahu. And then you'll just have another spot. That's all you're going to get. One spot or another. And God knows that. So he's just going to clean out this democracy thing. You think he's in favor of those parades through Jerusalem and Tel Aviv every year? You think God likes that? I'll be right back. I'm taking a fast break. How's the heater, girl? Good? Ooh, you're enjoying that heater. America's bringing another aircraft carrier group to the Middle East, by the way. I don't have any details on the name of the ship yet or when it'll be here, but I'm thinking 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that, unless it's already in Europe or someplace nearby and it's just been moved over here, in which case it might be here in 5 or 6 or 7 days or something. I don't know. Let me go through my, check the chat and go through my notes and tell you what else is going on that I didn't tell you. Do I believe in chutzpah? The word chutzpah means nerve or guts or something like that. That's George Foreman went, yeah. Well, somebody likes to pick on old people, so why don't you just pray that God kills you when you're young, genius? Never thought of that, did you? Let me check my notes. Okay, I have a prayer request for, I'm not done, but I don't want to forget the prayer request. A prayer request for RG, Romeo Girl, RG, Romeo Girl. Prayer requests to stop smoking and no depression. For RG, Romeo Girl, prayer requests, stop smoking and no depression. Next, prayer requests for KG, Kilo Golf, KG, Kilo Golf, KG, prayer requests to have good results on a test pertaining to breast cancer. So KG, prayer request to have good results on a test. So in other words, the test comes back negative for breast cancer, I assume. Okay. Japan is having a rough time with Trump and the tariffs. Trump is putting tariffs on Japanese cars and they're not happy. And they're talking about selling US Treasury bonds, which is going to weaken the dollar slightly. And there's a lot of products and goods that come in from Japan. And Japan is a strong ally of America. So this is a dicey thing. I don't know how it's going to play out. It probably a resolution between Trump and Japan, but I don't know what it'll be, but we'll find out. April 2nd, I believe Trump is smacking these tariffs on for enforcement. Um, Fires are picking up in America, by the way. It's very hard to get places to track the fires because they take them down and stuff, but they're picking up. Conan McGregor, I think, visited Trump and then he goes back and says he's going to be the president of Ireland or run for it. Maybe he's not going to be as anti Semitic as the Irish government. I don't know. Maybe he is. I don't have any idea. Being a fighter sure qualifies him to be president, doesn't it? Yeah. Ronald Reagan was a president too, an actor. But they're all actors. France and the UK asked their citizens to get out of Turkey now. France and the UK. Now that tells you that the situation in Turkey is ugly. They want the people to go to the airport, buy a ticket, get on a plane, and go someplace else so they don't have to send warships down there during a civil war to evacuate them out. So they believe there's trouble. France also told their people to leave Iran now, but I have not heard of another country doing so, just France. There are people saying there were other countries, but they won't name them. I researched it and I came up with nobody except France did, in fact, say that. Um, I'm not seeing. Let me really quick check my social media and see if anything changed with Netanyahu's position against the Supreme Court. This thing is going to blow up tonight or tomorrow, by the way. It may not blow up all the way yet, but it's going to get volatile tonight after Shabbat. That I'm pretty certain of. Let's take a quick look. The military of Israel said they will respond severely to what happened with the 5 missiles coming out of Lebanon. 2 landed in Lebanon, 3 were taken down heading to Israel, and they're going to hold the Lebanese government responsible. So they're going to start hitting other Hezbollah facilities and weapon depots, missile launchers, et cetera, around Lebanon, all over Lebanon, which is going to cause the Lebanese government to probably come against us if they can. I don't know how they can, but they're definitely living in our land, according to the Bible, and that's going to revert back to us quickly. It was 7:30 this morning, Israel time, that the rockets were shot at Israel. The defense minister Katz, which is a pretty right-wing guy, threatened to attack Beirut. He says, "You've attacked Metula," which is a little village, small city, you might say, right on the border of Lebanon. And he said that it doesn't matter, any place in Israel is sacred, and we'll hit your capital, see how you like it, because they're not stopping Hezbollah. They're supposed to deploy the military in the south and keep Hezbollah away from the Litani River to the border of Israel, and they're not doing so. Ukraine and Russia are fighting every day, but the reality is neither one is winning. Neither one. They're just destroying each other. It's so cold in this house. It's like 15 degrees below the outside temperature. It's going to probably take us till Wednesday or Thursday to warm up the house. But it already was warmed up. I was using fans, and now we're back to this again. Freezing cold in the house. And don't see any rain in the foreseeable future, which is good in my book, but you need it for the agriculture at the same time. Let me go check another place and see if we have any statements from our leader, Netanyahu. All right, let's see what else I can find here, if there's anything going on. So far, nothing new. This is got legs already, and it's going to start up tonight. And I don't know when Shabbat's over, and I'm not sure when it's going to start to escalate. Probably rather immediately. Now, the question that I have runs like this. If we do have civil unrest here and Netanyahu asks Trump for help, would Trump send soldiers over here to fortify Netanyahu? In other words, surround his offices and the Knesset? I don't think so. Maybe, but not at the early stage. Somehow, some way, some shape or form, America has troops in Israel and does evil in our sight. That's the scriptures. Jeremiah 50:51. And I don't know what that is or exactly how and when it comes about, but it looks like it's coming. So, let me just review the scriptures with you and show you what I'm talking about. Some of you already know, because it's not the first time I did this. This has been puzzling me for many months, and we have talked about it previously. It's very hard to try to figure out what this is all about. First thing is Netanyahu and Trump are following patterns. They're very similar to each other. Both of them have judges trying to overthrow the decisions they're making as to how to run the country. Both of them have a threat of revolution. And both of them have people in the government that are opposing them. Jeremiah 51:46. And lest your heart be faint and you fear for the rumor that shall be heard in the land. This is not Israel, I believe. I believe it's America. A rumor and shall both come 1 year, and after that, in another year, shall come a rumor and violence in the land, ruler against ruler. So if it happens to Israel, it may very well happen to America, but I do not think that this passage is talking about Israel here. The next verse says, therefore, behold, the days, plural, come, that I will do judgment upon the grave. Let's check that word grave, days. That's verse 47. Jeremiah 51:47. I got to go into the Hebrew. Yomim. Yeah, it's plural. It's days plural. They got it right. So that's not talking about the day of vengeance. It's talking about days come. So that would be preceding the day of vengeance, because there's no anything after the day of vengeance left. Therefore, behold, the days come that I will do judgment upon the graven images of Babylon, and her whole land shall be confounded. And that's the way Israel's looking now. The word for confounded is Strong's number 954, Bush. Not exactly confounded. Ashamed, disappointed. Whole land shall be confounded. Let's see what it says. The whole call. All the land shall be confounded, and all her slain shall fall in the midst of her. Then the heaven and the earth and all that is in them shall sing for Babel, for the spoiler shall come unto her from the north, saith Jehovah. Now this is where it gets hairy. As Babylon hath caused the slain of Israel to fall, so at Babylon shall fall the slain of all the earth, of all the land, it should read. So it's possible that this is the throwback to the old original Babylon, and the unclean spirits running that old Babylon are running America. That's what the tie is here. you that have escaped the sword, go away, stand not still, remember Jehovah afar off, and let Jerusalem come into your mind. So how could Babylon be Israel? Because he's telling the people to get out of Babylon and go to Jerusalem. Well, if this was referencing Israel, they'd already be there. So don't let them fool you. We are confounded because we have heard reproach. Shame hath covered our faces, for strangers have come into the sanctuaries of the Lord's house. So he's talking about Israel. So strangers is foreigners come into the sanctuary. The word for that is mikdash. So we're okay with that, a temple, or could be the tabernacle, but I think when it's called the Lord's house, we're talking about the temple here, of Jehovah's house. So, wherefore, behold, the days come, so they're defiling the house, the uncircumcised in heart and spirit and flesh, uncircumcised heart and flesh are going inside the sanctuary, which is holy, sacred place, and they're going in there. I doubt the glory of God of Israel has arrived to go in the temple yet when this happens, because if they walked in when he was inside, they'd probably just melt or burn up or something. Wherefore, behold, the days come, saith Jehovah, that I will do judgment upon her graven images, and through all her land the wounded shall groan. Now, where does it say shall do evil in the land? Okay, let's find that. I don't remember the verse. I'll look it up real quick. It shall do evil in your sight. Okay, let me get there. Hang on. I'm not getting it. Hang on a second. I'll be right with you. Ugh. All right, I'm gonna find it. I gotta change the search. Still not getting it. Let me try it another way. When I want to get the good prophetic scriptures, they used to just pop up in Google, but now they don't pop up anymore. I don't know what's happened. I can find it, I think, using eSword. Going as quick as I can here. We'll get there. I'll get it. I got it. Jeremiah 51:24. And I will render unto Babel and to all the inhabitants of Chaldea all their evil that they have done in Zion in your sight, saith Jehovah. That means he's going to pay them back for all the evil they did in our sight. But it's hard for me to figure that means in the past, because it's not like a throwback scripture. Maybe it is referencing back the old Babylon for what they did, but when it says in your sight, done in Zion in your sight, let's check the word for that. It's ayin, it means eye. So it's saying, okay, let's break the words down. Evil, right, yeah, evil, bad, okay. That, who or which, so it could be who they have done. Have done is Shesha, yeah, accomplished, do, in Sion, ayin, saith, Medaber, no, it's not say, it declares the Lord, like an oracle. Well, you could say, saith the Lord, saith Jehovah. Behold, I am against thee, O destroying mountain, saith Jehovah, which destroyeth all the earth. So does that mean that America's going to really be bombing everything all over or something? I don't know. Someone will say nuclear war, but I don't believe they have nukes. Anybody. I don't think anyone does. My hand upon thee and roll thee down from the rocks and will make thee a burnt mountain. Or he's going to kindle fires in and about their cities. So, all right, let's go to Zechariah 12, and I'm going to do this rather rapidly. The burden of the word of Jehovah for Israel, saith Jehovah, which stretcheth forth the heavens and layeth the foundations of the earth, and formeth the spirit of man within him. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about when they shall be in the siege both against Judah and Jerusalem. The reason I believe they're so focused on Jerusalem here is because Elijah's already working, as we'll see in Malachi 3, with the temple, without the glory of God in it yet. And in that day will I make Jerusalem, and we're also going to have a tabernacle. It says that in Ezekiel 37. I'll cover that. And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces. Though all the people of the land be gathered, all the heathen of the land be gathered together against it. That's the siege. It could mean the earth. And it could mean America is trying to oppose Israel. Netanyahu's holding back anything, that would be, considered nice to Jehovah. He's opposed to all of this, of course. So if he's gone, maybe America's trying to get rid of the government of Israel and saying they're not a legitimate government. Maybe the ultra right wing form the next government and it's not done by election or something. I don't know. I will smite every horse with punishment and his rider with. And the judges of Israel, that's your two witnesses, shall say in their heart, the inhabitants of Jerusalem have, it's really twisted, have their strength in the Lord of hosts their God. So there's a lot of believers in Jerusalem at this time, which is more evidence that Elijah is working, because that's not the case today, believe me. In that day shall I make the judges of Judah like an earth of fire among the wood, and like a torch of fire in a sheaf, and they shall devour all the people round about on the right hand and on the left, and Jerusalem shall be, what it really says is remain still again in her own place, even in Jerusalem. So there's the two witnesses burning the people up that are laying the siege or the blockade or the surrounding of us. They don't invade because they're kind of afraid about Elijah, so they're trying to just stop everything from going in and out. But we don't see the government operating here. We don't see the IDF. We don't see any of that. And we see the two witnesses are the judges of Israel. Now, what the churches never teach is Isaiah 1, maybe, 1, not 2, 1, maybe around verse 24. We can pick it up in verse 25. And I will turn my hand upon thee, and purely purge away thy dross, and take away all thy tin. Well, when we read this, Elijah's working with the Levites to train them to do the offerings in a way that's acceptable to Jehovah. Okay? And we also see this in Zechariah 13, verse 8 and 9. I'll read it to you. And it shall come to pass that in all the land called Haaretz, land of Israel, saith Jehovah, 2 parts or 2/3, therein shall be cut off and die, but the 3rd part shall be left therein, and I will bring the 3rd part through fire, and will refine them as silver is refined, and will try them as gold is tried. They shall call on my name, and I will hear them, and I will say, this is my people, and they shall say, Jehovah Elohim. Okay? Sounds like the same thing we just read. I'll read it to you again in Isaiah 1, verse 25, I believe. And I will turn my hand upon thee, and purely purge away thy dross, and take away all thy tin. Sounds like the same to me. So the 2/3 look like they could already be cut off. Now let's keep reading verse 26 of Isaiah 1. And I will restore thy judges as at the first. Okay? The shafal, well, the judges work like governors, and that's why they're calling them governors, but it's the judges. And judges are prophets, and the two witnesses in Revelation 11 are prophets. It's them, it's nobody else, who have fire coming out of their mouth. And thy counselors, well, that's the 70 counselors, as at the beginning. So restore thy judges as at the first. That's Moses and Aaron. Now we're going to have Elijah and Apostle John. And they'll have the 70 counselors. The city is afterward thou shalt be called the city of righteousness, the faithful city. Zion shall be redeemed, your redemption with judgment. And her, let's check the words here. With a verdict, it's so the 2/3 get cut off. It says he'll be a swift witness to the sorcerers, you know, the witches and stuff like that, the people that cheat the others, take false oaths in court and stuff like that. And the destruction of the transgressors and the sinners shall be together, and they that forsake Jehovah shall be consumed. That's your 2/3 getting cut off. Okay. So now we go into Malachi 3, and we read, Behold, I will send my messenger, Malach, that's Elijah, and he shall prepare the way before me, that's Elijah, and the eye shall suddenly come to his temple. This is the glory of God of Israel going into the temple. And the Malach, or the messenger of the covenant whom you delight in, that's Elijah, the Jews believe he will come and teach them Torah, which is true. Behold, he shall come, saith Jehovah of hosts. But who may abide the day of his coming? And who shall stand when he appeareth? For he is like a refiner's fire, and like a fuller's soap, and he shall sit as a refiner and purifier of silver, and he shall purify the sons of Levi, or the Levites, and purge them as gold and silver, that they may offer unto Jehovah an offering in righteousness. Then shall the offering of Judah and Jerusalem be pleasant unto Jehovah, as in the days of old, as in the former years, and I will come near to you to judgment, and I will be a swift witness against the sorcerers, against the adulterers, and against the false swearers, and against those that oppress the hireling in his wages, the widow and the fatherless, and that turn aside the stranger from his right, and fear not me, saith the Lord. That's the 2/3 going. So it looks like to me, now I can't guarantee this, and I can't, because I don't have the scripture to prove it, and I can't tell you directly, I have a scripture that directly outright says the government of Israel shall fall and Elijah shall appear. I don't have a scripture like that. It doesn't exist. And what is going to happen is that people are going to realize that trusting in man and trusting in the guns and the airplanes has failed them. And now there's a big siege on their borders that's probably going to keep building and building until they get burned up. And they're going to turn to God. And they're just going to cling to Jehovah. And when they get the offerings right, the blessings of the law will be on Israel. And that will probably tell the Lord to direct Elijah and Apostle John to light them up. And they light them up. And that should be on or about the day Yeshua appears in the clouds. And then they see him and become like him, and they have everlasting life. And all the people around the world will see him, and the true believers will also have everlasting life. And then let Zion come to mind, and they'll come to Jerusalem. And that's the next great Exodus. But they stop in the wilderness on the way to enter the bond of the covenant and pass under the rod. And some will probably die in the wilderness, like with Moses and Aaron. But as a guess only, my view of this as time in the wilderness is probably going to run more like 40 days, not 40 years. Okay, that's how I'm viewing this. Okay, not a long time. All right, so people will come to Israel, and you're going to have the blast of a trumpet which I've covered before, that's going to let you know that you got to wake up if you're sleeping and get outside and lift up your head, and your redemption draweth nigh. That's when you see Yeshua in the clouds. That's when you get everlasting life. You'll be like young again. You probably will have the mind of Christ, because you'll be like him. And God says he puts the law in our heart, in our inner parts. Everybody in Israel shall know the Lord, from the least to the greatest. They will not go around saying, know the Lord. They will know him. That's in Jeremiah 31. Zechariah 12 is Jacob's trouble. It's great. And that's the day of vengeance, when the nations are going to be destroyed. That's in Jeremiah 46, verse 28, and Jeremiah 30, verse 11. I'll read. Jeremiah 30, verse 11. I know that these are scriptures unfamiliar to a lot of you people, but the churches may not talk about them or teach them, but your Bible does. So you need to decide who you want to follow, your Bible or the church, because they don't agree. For I am with thee, saith Jehovah, to save thee, though I make a full end of all nations whither I have scattered thee. Yet I will not make a full end of thee, but I will correct thee in measure, and will not leave thee altogether unpunished. So all the nations he scattered the Israelites into are going to be destroyed. And this is associated with the birth of the nation in a day, which is the day Yeshua appears, and we see him and become like him. Now, I'll read you Jeremiah 46:28 also. And then it's up to you to figure out how good it is that your pastor never talks about this. Fear thou not, O Yaakov, my servant. That's the 12 tribes. He was the father of the people, the 12 that had a tribe named after him. O Yaakov, my servant, saith Jehovah, for I am with thee, for I will make a full end of all the nations, all the heathen nations, the Goyim, whither I have driven thee, but I will not make a full end of thee, but correct thee in measure, yet I will not leave thee wholly unpunished. Now, how many nations did he scatter the Israelites into? Well, it's Amos 9:9. For lo, I will command, and I will sift the house of Israel among all nations, call Goyim, all nations, like as corn is sifted in a sieve, yet shall not the least grain fall upon the earth. So not any of them is going to get lost unintentionally, I guess, or something. You owe it to yourself to search the Lord about people that don't teach you this is about to happen. Don't you think? I can always take questions. If anybody has a question, I'll be happy to answer it. Let me take a look at the live stream. I think we're good with the live stream. So let us watch very carefully what's going to happen in Israel. You got to remember the trigger for prophecy around the world coming to pass is going to be what happens in Israel. Well, I agree it's wise to watch Ukraine and Russia, but that's not going to trigger the worldwide prophetic events. It's what happens to and in Israel that's going to do it. You need to understand that. You should understand that. Same applies to Taiwan and China and North and South Korea and so forth. So I will keep watching closely to Netanyahu and see what he does. It's possible he backs off. It's highly likely he's going to try to make a move somehow. And he doesn't have any good moves left. He's boxed in on all sides. He's going to make people mad at him no matter what he does. So the only thing that might elevate him is if he manages to save all the hostages and then figure out a way to have Israel move back into Gaza and get rid of the people there. And I don't think that'll happen. Not with him. And remember, Ezekiel 34 says the bad shepherds, the rich, fat cattle, get cut off in Israel. That's your millionaires, your billionaires, the Satan bots, and the government. They're the shepherds. The rabbis are, of course, the shepherds, and the government. The government has the role of a shepherd in Israel. So, yeah, they get it, you know. They get cut off, but it doesn't tell us how, and it doesn't give us an exact sequencing. But I think I put it together for you. Now, why do I say the next temple comes down from heaven? And we're also going to have the tabernacle. Ezekiel 37, the last 3 verses. Everything I do, got scriptures. So you got to ask yourself, just because I teach with the scriptures things that the churches don't teach, who's wrong? Moreover, I will make a covenant of peace with them. It shall be an everlasting covenant with them. Everlasting life, everlasting covenant. I will place them, or put them, that means bring them to Israel. And if you're a believer in Yeshua HaMashiach, you're part of Israel, the real Israel, and all Israel shall be saved. And multiply them, and will set my sanctuary, or my temple, in the midst of them forevermore. The midst of Israel is Jerusalem. So he puts or sets this temple there. We're not building it. Ezekiel 43 talks about the glory of God coming into his temple. And we don't read anything about war when this is going on, nothing at all. So Zechariah 12, battle with the enemy being burned up, is probably already finished. My tabernacle also shall be with them. Well, you know, 2 Maccabees 2, chapter 2 talks about Jeremiah hiding the actual tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant, and the altar of incense in a cave in Mount Nebo, the mountain that Moses died on, and seals it up, and nobody could find it until the days that Jehovah sheds mercy on Israel. My tabernacle shall also be with them. I suspect the tabernacle maybe starts before the temple comes, and then but I don't think so, because the strangers enter the temple, so I don't think so. I think this is used to go in the wilderness with the people, like it was in the days of old with Moses and Aaron. I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And the Goyim, the heathens, shall know that Ani Yehovah, I am Yehovah, I Yehovah do Kadosh, sanctify. It really means make holy. I make holy Israel when my sanctuary, when my temple shall be in the midst of them forevermore. Now, if this temple didn't come down from heaven, why in the world would the heathen think God made Israel holy? I don't think it would work well, but if it came down from heaven, it would work, because it would look like it came down from heaven. Now let's talk really quickly about why you're really in Israel and what that means to Jehovah. I'm not talking about the church, I'm talking about Jehovah. Ezekiel 47, the last three verses, verse 21. So shall you divide this land unto you. This is after Yeshua has appeared. You shall divide this land unto you according to the tribes of Israel. And it shall come to pass that you shall divide it by lot for an inheritance unto you and to the strangers, the foreigners that sojourn among you. Those are you that are believers in Yeshua that are not of Israelite lineage. Okay? That sojourn among you, which shall beget children among you, and they shall be unto you as born in the country among the children of Israel. They shall have inheritance with you among the tribes of Israel. They get incorporate. Let's keep reading. And it shall come to pass that in what tribe the stranger, the foreigner, the non-Israelite, but the believer sojourneth, there shall you give him his inheritance, saith Adonai Jehovah. So they come with the tribes in the great Exodus, and the tribe they hooked up with coming over here is the tribe they become incorporated into forever. Them and their children, their grandchildren, all that. And they get an equal share of the land. So this business of we're not in Israel, we're in the church, but we stand next to Israel is nonsense. It never says the church will be saved. It says all Israel shall be saved in Romans 11. Satan's having you denounce that. I know you don't like hearing that, but that's what he's doing. How does Satan come? He comes as an angel of light. Makes the people think he's got some good insights and information and stuff like that. So these are the days we need to watch. We got to be careful and see what's going on. So I'm going to try to give you my best reports as to what happens with Netanyahu. So you might want to make sure you subscribe because I might be doing emergency live streams. It'd be nice if you hit the thumbs up button and help promote me with YouTube so other people can get this information. My thanks to those that have sent in offerings for the new iPad, and we're getting there. We need some more offerings to get a good iPad, so I'm waiting on some other people, which I'm sure others will step forward. And in the meantime, we'll be using the telephone for the live streams. So please pray for me and my wife Rivka. She's traveling. Pray for her. Have a good trip. She's visiting family. Pray for us to be happy, healthy, and whole. Have peace and joy. And pray for our finances. And pray for us to be happy, healthy, and whole. And our pets, the dogs and the birds, be happy, healthy, and whole. Pray for better videos with more insights, but I'm starting to narrow it down and getting more focused on this. Ezekiel 34 is a good chapter to read. It's a long one. I didn't read it, but I read it the other day. You can read it, Ezekiel 34. Zechariah 13, 8, and 9 is important to know. So pray for better videos, pray for the peace of Yerushalayim, and I send my Shabbat Shalom to all those who love Yeshua HaMashiach. And if you want to do spiritual warfare, do spiritual warfare. If you want to do prayer warfare, as they like to call it, do prayer warfare. warfare. You want to do both, do both. And if you can't help out with the iPad, pray that others can and do. And what else can I tell you? That's about it. So looks like we're getting into critical mass, and there's a lot of disturbances in Mark 13. It talks about disturbances. Those are protests and people getting kicked out of the government and stuff. There's a lot of that going around now. And that's what I got. So I send my Shabbat Shalom to all those who love Yeshua HaMashiach. And I'm out.